Hey there, Brad from 4Player Network, and this is not my top 10. It is my top 15 most overlooked games from 2021. Before I tell you about my number 15, I just wanted to say that this is a list of games that I feel like were overlooked or didn't get talked about enough last year, and there was a lot of them. There's a lot of them. I also wanted to say that this list doesn't repeat anything that's on my top 10, so while my top 10 does have a few games that I think were horribly overlooked, you're going to see all new games here. With that said, my number 15 is a little physics-based platformer called Webbed. It's a game where you play as a cute little spider, and it just feels really good to move around this world. Everything is very physicsy, swinging feels good. It honestly feels as good as it does in playing a Spider-Man game to move around as this little dude. There's lots of collectibles, there's lots of variety and kind of like puzzly stuff to solve, but really I think this deserves to be played because it just feels good to move around. It feels good to make webs, and it feels really good to swing. So I think it's out on Switch now. You should pick it up. It's pretty cool. And that's my number 15. Number 14 on my list of overlooked games from last year is a little game called Inglet. This is a pretty short but tight and well made platformer from the creator of Knit Stories, which is one of my favorite indie games from like long ago, before indie games were even popular, honestly. And that developer still around, still making cool games. And this platformer, it's kind of like those Mario levels where all the platforms are like rectangles or squares of water, and you're jumping from like floating block to floating block. You know what levels I'm talking about. This level kind of takes that idea and runs with it. It's not very long, but they never seem to run out of cool, fresh ideas to make it more interesting and more challenging. And it has like a nice vibe to it. Like the music's good, the sound effects are cool. I really like the look of it. It kind of doesn't really look like anything else I've played this year, but it's always fun. It's always like challenging, and it just feels like a game that's really good to get good at and to kind of get into the flow. It's very zen. So definitely try Inglet. Number 13 on my list of overlooked games from last year is not even really technically a game, but honestly, there's going to be a few things on this list that aren't full game experiences, but are worth mentioning. This is a downloadable story campaign. It was free, but it did come out last year, called Smoke and Thunder, for the game Pistol Whip. Now, I know a lot of people have played Pistol Whip. It's very popular, but I didn't see a lot of people talking about this, and it's really, really cool. Probably my favorite levels of all of Pistol Whip are in this story campaign, Smoke and Thunder. It's very Western themed. Like, all of them have cool like vocal tracks, these levels, and it just feels really cool to play. It's really awesome. If you know what Pistol Whip, you know what this is, but just take that and give it a Western theme with like really cool music. I think one of the levels is that opening song from Borderlands 2. You know which one I'm talking about. It's just got a really good vibe. It's free. A lot of y'all have Pistol Whip. Download this. It's awesome. Number 12 on my list of overlooked games is a little game called XO1. And I hate that I keep calling these little games. It feels insulting. But, this isn't very long. It was on Game Pass. I feel like a lot of these games are on Game Pass, actually. But hell, that's why I played so much this past year. Anyways, XO1, it's a game where you play as like a spacecraft / space marble thing, and you're flying through cool space planetoid environments via like gravity and building momentum by flinging yourself off of slopes, kind of like Tribes or Tiny Wings, honestly, by, adjusting gravity and just flinging yourself through the air, and you can like turn into a disc and glide. And this game is really all about vibes. It's kind of a simple looking game, but they do a lot with a little, and it really is one of the coolest looking games I played this year, one of the most atmospheric games I played this year, and it just really feels good to go through these environments. And from level to level, they really do kind of like take a simple premise but change it up in some interesting ways. Some levels you're just kind of above like an ocean planet, and you're actually using your disc form to skip along the water, and it's just a cool physicsy platformer, atmospheric game. Vibes, man. This is a vibes game, and it's short and it's on Game Pass and it's pretty awesome. XO1, try it out. Number 11 on my list of overlooked games is a narrative adventure game called Before Your Eyes, and it's definitely one of the more unique games I played last year because this is a game that you control via blinking. You hook up your webcam and you calibrate it. It detects your blinks, and you play a child very early on in life, and you're having these story vignettes with your family and your friends, and every time you blink, it just cuts that scene off and skips ahead. It's very much that whole kind of blink and you'll miss it thing, right? Where you'll be in a scene that you definitely don't want to miss, but you're gonna have to blink eventually because that's just how your body works, and that's what this game's about. And it's a pretty simple story, but it's it's an emotional one, and I feel like that's sort of what this developer's doing, because towards the end you're kind of like fighting back tears, and guess what happens when you get a little moist in the eyes? It makes you want to blink, and you're like skipping scenes, and you're like, no, this sucks. But it's really cool and it's really unique, and more people should definitely try it. It's called, again, Before Your Eyes, and it's pretty awesome. Next up on my list is Unpacking, and I felt like this almost didn't qualify for the list because it did sort of get a lot of buzz towards the end of the year when people were talking about like their favorite narratives of the year. But I think at the time it came out, it didn't get a lot of buzz. So Unpacking, it is a cool narrative game that doesn't actually have any real like words or story or anything. It's just a game about unpacking boxes, taking items out of boxes and putting them in a room or rooms as you move into different places throughout the course of this person's life, the person who owns these objects. And you start out as a kid and it's like stuffed animals and toys and stuff, and as you're getting older you keep some of those of your favorite toys, and then you start moving into like certain places where you have to start making compromises about where you put things, or maybe you don't have enough room to put all your things. And it tells a story through the environmental storytelling that happens by just placing objects. It's a really cool little trick. You kind of get it from like immediately why it's such a cool trick, but it's still effective nonetheless, and it's just a really enjoyable experience. The visuals, the audio of like the different objects, and just the way it feels to place objects in the world, it's just a really nice, cool experience. I think this one might be on Game Pass as well, so definitely try out Unpacking. Number 9 on my list of overlooked games. I wish it wasn't overlooked. It kind of makes me sad that it's overlooked. But it's Griftlands. This is a Slay the Spire type game from Klei Interactive, Klei Entertainment. I don't actually know, but they make amazing games like Mark of the Ninja and Invisible Ink and Don't Starve. You've heard of them. Well, they made this game that's a lot like Slay the Spire, but honestly quite a bit more ambitious. They're trying to do a lot of cool stuff with like storytelling and characters and world, but and there's two types of combat systems. There's a combat system that's very much more like Slay the Spire for like traditional combat, but then you get into arguments and with people, and the argument battle system is a completely different deck of cards and a completely different, unique set of mechanics that's actually really cool and fresh. And you often get into these situations where you have to decide, do I want to get into an argument with this person, or do I want to get into a traditional fight with this person? And I always kind of want to do both, because both decks are cool and both sets of mechanics are really unique, and it's just a really good one of those. It's definitely more complex than something like Slay the Spire, but if you put in the time to really get used to these mechanics and systems, it's a really addictive deck builder with a cool story and playable characters that are very different from one another. So just try out Griftlands. It's even on Switch. I'm bummed that people missed this one. Number 8 on my list. God, it could have easily been number 9. I should have just put it at number 9. Anyways, Ys 9. One of the bigger games on my list. Sorta. It's in that it's not really an indie game, but it is a cool action RPG that I felt like got overlooked this year. In fact, I think it's one of the more overlooked Ys games to come out in recent memory, but it is really just as good as all those others. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox is sort of building off the formula of Ys 8 in a lot of ways, so if you play that, you're kind of familiar with it. But the reason I think it stands out and is pretty cool is sort of the things that this game that's unique to this series. It's a game that, it's still kind of your dungeon crawling hack and slash type game, but in this one you have like a whole city hub world to kind of explore and find secrets in, with all your different characters. And as you unlock more characters, you get more abilities to traverse the city in new and interesting ways, like running up walls or gliding or grappling. And by the time you get all the characters, you have all these cool abilities to like fully explore the city and get secret chests and items. And it's just a really good comfort food game. The combat is fast and it's an Ys game. It feels good to fight things, and the more you use them, the more your skills, the more they level up. And it's just a really cool game that, maybe it was the time that it came out, but I really didn't see a lot of people talking about Ys 9 Monstrum Nox, but it's really good. It's a really good Ys game. If you like Ys games, or if you like action RPGs, try this out. It's cool, and the music's rad because it's Ys. You know what I'm talking about. Number 7 on my list of overlooked games I played in 2021 is Ender Lilies. And at a first glance, this game does sort of look like Hollow Knight, and it is one of those. It's a Metroidvania with kind of Souls-like elements. It even has, what do they call them? Like the badges or whatever, the medallions from Hollow Knight. It has a system sort of like that where, you're kind of picking and choosing various passives to kind of make your build or whatever. But one of the ways that I think Ender Lilies separates itself is that you have like a whole arsenal of special abilities. These are abilities that you get from like the various enemies you come across, and you kind of build your character based on using these skills, which do have like a limited use. They almost have like an ammo to them, and you're equipping all these, and you're kind of building out a character in a pretty cool, like, unique way. Like, they're all cool skills, and you kind of want to level them all up, and it's really addictive to kind of unlock them all. And I think one of the cooler aspects of it is kind of like Aria of Sorrow, like Castlevania Aria of Sorrow or Dawn of Sorrow. It's like a soul system where the abilities are directly coming from the enemies, but instead of just farming them by killing those enemies, each of the enemy types has like a secret boss hidden in the world, or maybe not so hidden. And once you take out that boss like version of the enemy, then you get that like skill that you can equip on your character. It's just a really cool, addictive game that's really fun to 100% because the map has that Resident Evil style, like once you clear a room it changes colors, so you want to like clear out the whole map by like changing all the colors from orange to blue, kind of like the Resident Evil map. And just one of the better, more addictive, like good combat, just a really good one of those that came out last year that probably got overlooked because stuff like, Metroid Dread came out. But definitely try out Ender Lilies. I think it's out on Switch now. Number 6 on my list is very barely actually a game, but it is an experience that I had with a video game controller last year, and it is Kid A Amnesia Exhibition. This is sort of like an art exhibit project that came out with the re-release of Radiohead's Kid A and Amnesia. And how do I describe this? I'll say this: I am a big Radiohead fan. Kid A especially is one of my favorite albums of all time, And this is a game where you kind of walk around and look at art and listen to like music from the albums, but it's also like they do a lot of cool, unique stuff with the way you kind of experience those tracks that you might be really familiar with, and the visuals that go along with it are just wild. This is definitely one of the coolest looking games slash art exhibits I experienced last year. Even if you're not a Radiohead fan and you just want to see some cool trippy shit with some really cool music, definitely download this. I think it's on PS5. I think it's on the Epic Game Store on PC. A lot of people thought this was a VR game, but it's not. It's not VR. Honestly, I wish it was VR because it's so like immersive, and like it's a game I really want to be in VR because I think it would be that much more impactful, but it's not. But it is still like a really cool experience, and some of the songs that are some of my favorites, I got kind of emotional because it's a way to experience them in a way I've never experienced them before, and some of these tracks are, you just got to try this thing. It's fucking wild. Again, even if you never heard a Radiohead song in your life, try this out. It is free, it is cool, and it was something that, I don't know, it didn't get talked enough about last year, and let's be honest, this is one of the best looking games, question mark, of everything I played last year. So yeah, Kid Amnesia, just download it. It's great. Number 5 on my list of overlooked games is probably the most successful game on this list, maybe, right? Or the biggest game. Probably has the biggest budget. But damn it, it's overlooked in my eyes. It's Monster Hunter Stories 2, which is the Pokemon-style RPG spin-off of the main Monster Hunter series. The reason I'd say it qualifies as overlooked because it got way less buzz and talk than the Monster Hunter Rise, the proper Monster Hunter game that came out last year. It sold way less, it got talked about way less, and honestly that makes sense, right? You know, it's not Monster Hunter proper, but it is a cool RPG for the Switch with a lot of like pretty great production. It's on PC too, actually, which is pretty wild. But the production values are really great. You know, I think we're all playing that new Pokemon game right now, and I'm looking at it and wishing it had like the voice acting and the visual style of Monster Hunter Stories 2, which honestly kind of remarkable. The battle system feels unique, but so very Monster Hunter, even though it's turn-based. And this was a game that I thought was going to be too easy or too simple, and the game kept getting harder and kept getting more complex, and I was able to utilize the knowledge of the monsters I had by playing Monster Hunter games to, like, you know, like gain the upper hand in battles as they started to get crazier. Just a really well put together game that if you have a lot of Monster Hunter love and nostalgia, you're gonna experience. You're gonna hear all those same sound effects, and you're gonna see the sets of armors that you're familiar with and monsters that you love, but in a cool new way. And one of my favorite boss fights of the year is the final boss of this game. He's a real son of a bitch, but pretty fucking awesome. I just highly recommend it. It's just a joy to look at. It's colorful, it's polished, and the kinship attacks are some of the best, coolest animations of the year. Just play Monster Hunter Stories 2. 20 million people bought Monster Hunter World, and a lot of those people should try this because it's that cool. Anyways. Number 4 on my list of overlooked games from last year is one that, kind of like Unpacking, maybe doesn't qualify because it did get, some more buzz in Game of the Year talks at the end of the year. But honestly, sometimes I think that the circles I listen to, like podcasts and videos for, might not be as out there as I think they are. So I'm going to bring up Forgotten City here. It's a cool first-person adventure game. This project originally started as like a Skyrim mod, but it got spun off and turned into its own standalone game. And you have those Skyrim vibes, but there's no RPG progression or anything in this game. This is definitely an adventure game where you're exploring a underground, Roman city. And I don't want to really spoil anything, but there's a time loop, and it's a time loop mystery game where you're talking to people and you're trying to figure out how to break the loop, how to change the outcomes of the different things that are happening. This is a city where if anybody in the city commits a sin, then everybody dies. That's the long and short of it. But it's a time loop game, and you're trying to figure out how to stop all the bad things from happening so you can break the loop so everybody doesn't die. And it goes to some pretty wild places, but it has memorable characters and very memorable moments. It honestly feels like the best Elder Scrolls like side quest line ever, right? Think about like your favorite Elder Scrolls games, and you think about like the Dark Brotherhood Guild. That's such a memorable quest line, right? This feels like something like from that, right? If this was in like a proper Elder Scrolls game, this would be the quest line that everybody's talking about. That's what Forgotten City is. Very cool, very memorable, very unique. Probably the best loop game of the year, maybe. So definitely try out the Forgotten City if you haven't yet. I also think this is on Game Pass now, so yeah, play it. Number 3 on my most overlooked games of the past year is a Castlevania game. That's right, a new Castlevania game came out, believe it or not. Now, granted, you have to have an iOS device because this is an Apple Arcade exclusive. This was actually a game that came out in a couple of regions, like in Japan. I think it came out in Canada a few years ago as a free-to-play, kind of like gacha style Castlevania game, similar to like Castlevania Harmony of Despair. But if you know me, you actually know I love Harmony of Despair, where you are unlocking like different characters, and each of the different characters from old Castlevania games, they play different, and you can play like co-op or whatever. Anyways, they took that game, they removed out all of like the real life currency, like free to play currencies from the game, and they threw it on Apple Arcade. So it is still that same game. It still has like weird gacha mechanics where you're grinding out currency to pull like weapon and armor drops, right? And look, the reason it's on my list is not just because I love Castlevania, but I downloaded this game expecting to hate it, but it's actually kind of like a really satisfying nostalgia fest. If like me, you've played every single Castlevania game and you love all those Castlevania games and you love those characters, it's very similar to Harmony of Despair in that way, just with a lot more grindy gotcha mechanics. But again, you're not really spending real world money. All the systems are in the game, but you kind of have to have a tolerance for it. What I would say is really good about this game, surprisingly good, is granted I did hook up I was playing with the PS4 controller, but the actual combat and the way it feels to like fight things and move around the world, like it actually feels pretty good to play. Like all the hits from like your whip or your sword or your spells or whatever, it feels very like satisfying and chunky. Like there's a lot of like hit stun or whatever. It feels good to fight things in a Castlevania game that came out in 2021. And, it's not the best Castlevania game I ever played, but it is definitely a Castlevania game. And I love Castlevania, and I think I'm the only one who played this last year. But it's good. It's cool. I'm glad I tried it. It's Shinoa's in the game. You like Shinoa, right? I love Shinoa. It's pretty cool. A lot of stuff to unlock. Cool weapons. It's Castlevania, damn it. The music's good. There's new Castlevania remixes. That's worth the price of admission alone, which is, on Apple Arcade. I don't know. It's cool. It's overlooked. Fuck you. Number 2 on my list of overlooked games from 2021 is not Life is Strange True Colors. That definitely doesn't qualify to go on an overlooked list, which I did play. I did really like. But what is going on my overlooked list is the thing that I heard like almost no one talking about, and that is the standalone or the DLC that they released for Life is Strange True Colors called Wavelengths, where you play as Steph, who is a character from Life is Strange True Colors, and she's also a character from Life is Strange Before the Storm, if you've played that. But the reason I think this deserves mention is because this is like a pretty cool, unique take on a Life is Strange game. You're not just playing through, a story as a character like you do in everything else Life is Strange. You're actually playing as a radio DJ and a record store worker, right? Where in the story follows 4 different seasons as you play this character Steph, and as you're playing, you're actually playing a radio DJ where you have to go on the radio, you have to play records, and you get to choose the records, and you get to queue up records from like the library, and you're answering calls, and there's a lot of like decision making and the advice that you give on these calls that you're getting, and you're going on a dating app and you're swiping left or swiping right, and you're getting into conversations with the various women that you're are maybe dating, and you're making a lot of choices there. And as the seasons pass, you're seeing stuff in the record store that shows like items from those relationships, and she comments on them, and you're even reading ads on the radio, right? It's all, I say, of all the Life is Strange games, the Wavelengths DLC is probably the most decision making you make. If you like making decisions and like adding flavor to your playthrough, like this is like a really cool one. And the story does get emotional. I mean, if you know the story of Life is Strange season 1 and Before the Storm, and the characters that that this character Steph knows, it brings some of that stuff comes up, and it is kind of emotional and kind of interesting. So I think it's a game that Life is Strange, a game that a lot of people have played, but not a lot of people played this Wavelengths DLC. It's different enough, it's unique enough, but it is, I think a pretty important part of that character and that story. So definitely try out the Wavelengths DLC for Life is Strange True Colors. It's cool. My number 1 favorite, most overlooked game from last year that just missed my top 10 list is Tainted Grail Conquest. This is another card-based deck builder style game like Slay the Spire, like Griftlands, which I mentioned earlier. But this one stood out the most for me this year. It is surprisingly... When I went into this game, I watched a trailer and I'm like, okay, I know what this is. It's got cards. This looks, it looks kind of dark and cool monsters and stuff, right? But what I wasn't expecting when I started playing this was a game that has a surprising amount of like polish. This is like a fully voice acted deck building roguelike, right? But it also has like a lot of like story and events and characters that, much like a game like Hades, you have these story and these characters and these relationships that evolve from run to run, and you're starting quests in one run that continue in like a subsequent run, and you're bringing people back to your village, and they're going to be all your shopkeepers and stuff, and you're continuing those relationships, and once you're back in your village, it's very, very Tristram from Diablo. Just amazing Diablo vibes. Like the card system is surprisingly like complex. I think there's like 9 different character classes you can play as, and they all play like very different and like cool and unique ways, and some surprisingly cool ideas for enemy types. I mean, for job player types, right? Just a really well-made one of these with like good music and good voice acting, and just like surprisingly atmospheric. If you like, Slay the Spire, if you like, like any sort of like card-based deck builder game, but if you also like Hades or Diablo, like try this out. Guess what? It's also on Game Pass. And it's just really, really good, and no one talked about this, but I highly, highly recommend it. Just good vibes all around. Man, 2021 was all about vibes, damn it. And that's it. That's my number 1 most overlooked game from last year. And I did it. The most games I talked about from a year. That's 15 games on top of my top 10. Anyways, 2021, finally done with it. Play some of these games. I'm sure you've discovered something new. Anyways, thanks for watching. Goodbye.